consider, if you will, as a kind of an introduction to what we're going to be looking at in the next few minutes, I want you to consider the notion of mental health. And I want you to, especially in that, consider the notion of mental illness. Now, I want you to think about that in comparison to physical health and physical illness. And what I mean by that is, if you enjoy health physically, you also from time to time enjoy, or don't enjoy, but you experience illness. That's part of our walk on this earth, is there are times that you have health, there are times that you have illness. In the same way, you enjoy from time to time mental health, but you also experience mental illness. Everyone does. Part of the difference, and part of, as a therapist, part of my defensiveness about the term mental health is how it's used. And it's often used to ostracize people. We don't do that with physical illness. We don't talk about people who have a physical illness of being in a separate category from where we are, because we all experience. What we do is we deny our own emotional illness or mental illness. We deny that, and part of the reason for that is because very possibly our illness has not gotten to the point of being treatable. Now let me explain. There are times that you experience physical illness, but you don't go to the doctor. The times that you go to the doctor are when it gets significant enough that it begins to impair your lifestyle. And then you go to a doctor, and the doctor then will determine whether or not what you're experiencing is diagnosable, and that's the first step to treatment. Your mental illness is very similar to that. It is, you experience mental illness, but often not to the degree that it's diagnosable and treatable. In other words, I have ADHD. It's just part of who I am. I have attention deficit. I am one of those squirrel people, okay? Now, my ADHD is not to the degree of being diagnosable or treatable. If it got to where it was impairing my life, then I might go to a mental health person and say, I need help with my concentration, attention span, activity level, et cetera, et cetera. I have certain situations and environments in which I'm a bit OCD. Okay, when I say bit, it's not to the point where it impairs my life. It's only to a point where it impairs Charlotte's life. Therefore, I don't see any need to get help for it. It's not whether or not I have mental illness, it's what kind of mental illness I have and the degree to which I experience it. It's the same with physical. And so I'm saying all that. I want you to be concerned. I want you to be investigative when somebody uses the term mental health. Because generally what they're talking about is those who are diagnosably involved in mental health pursuits. We all have it. It's just, is it to a degree that it's impairing our lives? Now, in order to make the application of what we're going to talk about today, have you ever considered suicide? Have you ever had a thought of suicide? Now, there's degrees of that. There is ideation, there's planning, there's things like that. If you ever got to a point in your life where for a moment or an hour or a day or a season, you believed that the world would be better, your family would be better, and that you would be better if you were not here, then you know the extreme of what that represents. I dare say many, many, many more people than you would ever expect have had a time or a season or a day or an hour or a minute where they considered life would be better if I'm not here. Now, they may not follow through and actually plan something, but the thought hinders them. I want us to talk about the hoax of self-esteem. And the main question is, do they know? who they are. We're going to describe who they is in just a moment. But no one takes your self-esteem from you. In fact, I want to suggest to you there's really no such thing as self-esteem. And I want to describe what I mean by that in just a moment. I think it is a mindset that has been fostered that creates more problems than it deals with. If self-esteem were the measure of mental health, then isolation on a desert island would be the ideal. I would go on to say, if you're schizophrenic, it wouldn't matter if you lived on an island by yourself. If you were murderous, it wouldn't matter if you lived on an island by yourself. If you were antisocial, it wouldn't matter if you lived on an island by yourself. You see, the issue is not my diagnosis. The issue is, how do I react with others? The impact that it has on my relationships. The esteem issue is actually inter-esteem. It's how we're viewed by others. Again, if you're on an island by yourself, what other problems you have or issues you have don't matter, because they're not comparative to anything. There's no one saying you shouldn't be this way or you should be that way. You're king, and it's great to be king on your own island. The problem comes in interacting with others. That's why social media is so destructive in the way that it's often being used. The problem is, as long as you live your life, things go well. When you start comparing it with others, and not just comparing it with others, but comparing it with a projection of others, then you begin to have ideas that I am not adequate, I am not good, or I am not worthy, or whatever, because look at this person, look at this family, look at their presentation, and I would say, look at their idealization of themselves. And it's that comparison. It's how we interact with others. So an idealization of a comparative presented self. What do I mean by that? Presented idealization of how I fit into things, how I compete with you, how I am acceptable or should be acceptable or maybe even superior to you. And it's all artificial because it's a presentation. It's a projection. We don't present who we really are for very long, really in public very much. So what happens there is the anonymous degradation of others. Look at this about me. Look at my photo that was staged. Look at my family that was staged. Look at all of these artificialities of my projection, and then compare yourself to that. And it's that inner esteem that's our issue. To present an idealized self, competitors must be undermined. If I'm going to present an idealized self, you can't be as good, or I can't be ideal. So the idea of self-esteem is really a problem. If you're over 50, and you don't have to raise your hand, but if you're, you could nod and let me know. If you were over 50, was suicide pretty rare when you were young? Do you remember anyone in your school committing suicide? Do you remember anyone in your neighborhood committing suicide? If you heard of someone committing suicide, was it somebody out there, not somebody within my social world? Now, let me give you some information according to CDC, and the reason I'm talking about suicide is it's the extreme. It's measurable. We know that there is severe mental health issues when someone ends their life. And so we can measure, we can say that person is pretty far along on this continuum. And it's demonstrable, it's measurable. According to the CDC, in the years 2024 and 2025, among high school students, over 1 in 5 high school students reported seriously considering suicide in the past year, and nearly 1 in 10 reported attempting it. The second leading cause of death among teenagers in our current culture is suicide. The first is accidents. after accidents ending the lives of teens. And that's all kinds of accidents. The second cause of death among teenagers is suicide. And you look at the statistics, 1 in 5 consider it, 1 in 10 have reported attempting it. Ages 12 to 17, among adolescents in this age group, 12.3% had serious thoughts of suicide in the past year, and 3.3% attempted suicide, age 12 through 17. Ages 18 to 25, over 12% of young adults had serious thoughts of suicide in the past year, with 2% reporting an attempt. Now I'm going to shock you a little bit. Guess which age group overall has the highest rate of suicide? It's 85 and over. Now, again, the reason we're talking about this is we're talking about an extreme in those who have suffered to the point of hopelessness. The higher risk groups, according to gender, female teenagers about twice as likely as males to experience persistent sadness, suicidal thoughts, and suicide attempts. However, males are 4 more times more likely to die by suicide. Girls thinking about it more, boys actually do it when they think about it. Another higher risk group is sexual identity. LGBTQ plus teenagers face significantly higher risk. Compared to their heterosexual peers, they are 2 to 3 times more likely to report persistent sadness, suicidal thoughts, and attempts. Geography also applies. The suicide rates among youth aged 15 through 19 are higher in rural areas, 15.8 per 100,000 compared to urban areas, almost twice as much so. And that would suggest possibilities of isolation and things like that. Suicide most often occurs when various stressors and health issues converge to create feelings of hopelessness. Contributing factors can include mental health, depression, and other mental disorders such as anxiety, bipolar disorder, and substance use issues are significant risk factors. Now, I embolden mental disorders because I want you to realize what we're doing when we say this is we're categorizing a group of people that are not us. And we're calling those people who have mental illness. What I wanted you to understand beginning at the beginning, we all have mental illness. It's just to what degree, how complex, etc. So when you see mental disorders, mental illness, I want you to realize we're categorizing people in a way that we don't have to relate to them. We're categorizing them in a way that they don't relate to us. But we're all in the same boat. And we're all struggling to different degrees and in different ways. Other common risk factors are environment, access to firearms, other lethal means, prolonged stress like bullying, stressful life events such as rejection or loss, and exposure to the suicides of others can increase risk. One of the things that I am concerned about in our cultures, with the increase of suicide, there is the increase of the idealization of suicide, because now it is an option. Remember, I asked those of you who are over 50, how about over 40? How about over 30? When do you start getting into the decade that it became more of a reality? In my social circle when I was growing up, I don't remember anybody that committed suicide. I don't remember anybody in any of the schools. I went to public and private schools. I don't remember that. I do remember hearing reports, but it was always of those who were outside of my, and it was as problematic and as horrible it didn't indirectly affect me. Whereas if somebody in my social circle consider that or acts on that, that makes a suggestion to me of a potential alternative. It can create a snowball where if the answer for other people in their extreme suffering is to end their lives, that now becomes an option for me, because as horrible, quote unquote, as it has become more socially acceptable. And in family history, a family of suicide or mental health problems is another risk factor. When I was doing counseling at OSU, I had a family of mom and dad and 3 daughters, and among them, they had attempted 27 different suicides. What frightened me about that is one day they were going to be successful. What did suicide represent to them? It was totally acceptable in their world. And I mentioned that elders are at risk. Suicide rates are highest in the 85-plus age group due to a convergence of compounding factors, including declining physical health, social isolation, and increased loneliness. Older adults in this age bracket also tend to plan their suicides more carefully, using more lethal methods, which contribute to a higher rate of completed suicides compared to younger populations. When you get 85 or older, you get better at it. And they don't attempt it, they do it. And they make sure. But I want you to see very similar, this hopelessness that comes through isolation, loneliness, physical decline. Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. And God said, let us make man in our image according to our likeness. And let them rule over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the sky and over the cattle and over all the earth and over every creeping thing that creeps on earth. And God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. And God blessed them. And God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. What we've lost in our culture is the understanding we're made in the image of God. What we've lost in our culture is the significance of being made in the image of God. What it means to be a reflection of God himself. What it means to be imbued with God in our DNA. Now you want to talk about self-esteem, let's talk about God-esteem. Let's talk the basis of me feeling good about myself is not my abilities or my failures. It's my creation. It's how I was brought about. It's how I was designed. It's understanding that I am fearfully and marvelously made, in the words of David. But to have a culture that has been separated from that, where's the basis of self-esteem? If it doesn't come from my design, if it doesn't come inherently in the fact that I'm human, because of that design, then where would esteem come from? And when you steal that from a culture, you steal the basis to feel good about living, to have purpose in living, to not be isolated, but to be part of a family, to not be lonely, but to be included. Verse 31, and God saw that he had made, and behold, it was very good. It's good to be human. It's good to be designed like God himself. Therefore, it doesn't matter what others think of you. It doesn't matter of what others think of me. I know in my heart I'm made in the image of God, and I am fearfully and wonderfully made. And my essence is to be good. My essence is to bring glory to you and to God. That's my essence. That's my DNA. But if we extract that, how am I supposed to feel good about being a human if, in fact, there's no basis for my design? That's what happened in Romans chapter 1. For this reason, God gave them over to degrading passions. For the women exchanged a natural function in that which is unnatural. And in the same way also men abandon the natural function of the woman and burn in their desire toward one another, men with men committing indecent acts and receiving in their own persons the due penalty of their error. God talks about, through Paul in Romans chapter 1, the depravity that humans get into when they reject or forget God. Romans 1 verse 18, he goes through a whole list. And everything that you believe is evil, plus what God adds is evil, is a result of the rejection of God. Now, guys, I want to talk about two different kinds of folks in this rejection. There's those who are the leaders. Those who are on the forefront of this rejection. And then there are those who have to follow in their wake, who have not rejected, but they've been taught to ignore. Those folks are confused. They're not evil. They don't know what to believe because the people that they put their trust in to tell them what reality is and truth in are lying to them. So you have a phalanx of those at the beginning, and these are the most vocal. These are the most proud. These are the most want everybody to follow them. And they will say, there is no God. They will say, you're not made in the image of God. They will say, you don't have intrinsic value. In fact, you're just a naked ape. And they've lied. And the children are raised with that. What do they learn? Hopelessness. Because as Tara was teaching us, the young people, God is our refuge. He's our strength. He's the reason we have hope. So the greatest human hoax, I believe, in the history of mankind arose in the last 150 years. Throughout time, every civilization has had some form of religion, some form of higher power, some being that gave purpose to why we're here, that gave meaning to what we're going to do, even if it means we kill our own kids to keep them happy. That gives us direction, it gives us focus, it gives us purpose. Governments that oppose religion did so for pragmatic reasons. Do you understand the Soviet Union? They never got rid of the Greek Orthodox Church or the Eastern Orthodox Church, as much as government tried. But government was opposed to religion not because it philosophically makes no sense. It's because it controls people and we don't want the competition. Communism didn't address human origin except through evolutionary theory. The rise of evolutionary theory was an attempt to address origins without God. That's never happened in the history of the world. The rejection of God was pragmatic in order for me to control you. So I would tell you there is no God. I would claim atheism for you, but I never explained where we came from. Just ignored that issue so I could control you as a leader. Then a theory comes along that something primordial, ooze, washed up on shore and stood up and called itself man through a process of stages. And that it's as meaningless because it could have gone in any other way. We could just as easily not be as we are. We could just as easily be any other kind of creature, human, but by some difference in evolution, we became prescient. We became self-aware. We became different, but not really different. Isn't that confusing? If you teach someone they're a gorilla, how should they act? If my wife is able to convince me I'm a jerk, how should she expect me to act? If she convinces me I'm a prince, how should she expect me to act? If you convince someone they're an accident of evolution with no design or purpose, you take away the opportunity for hope. Because life becomes meaningless in and of itself. The theory of natural evolution strips humanity of its humanity. We just become an organism. And listen to me. There are organisms around your house that you're spraying to kill. There are organisms around your home that you step on. There are organisms you're trying to get rid of because they're just organisms. That's why we're afraid of aliens, because they can come and stomp on us like bugs. That's our fear. It took 150 years for this theory to arise. And think about this, since humans evolved from apes, quote unquote, when a 3-year-old human child fell into the enclosure of Harambe the gorilla in 2016, the culture was divided concerning to whom concern should be shown. Most everyone knows the name of the gorilla, but few know the name of the human. That's where we've come. And we don't know which to defend, the ape or the hairless ape. Oh my goodness, folks, we've lost our minds. And not only that, we've lost everything that comes with what God gives to us, who has written himself on our DNA. Now, guys, this is the point in the sermon where we usually rail against a society that's lost its mind. Rather, it's my desire to cry for a generation of children who were raised with no basis for hope and just anger. Does your heart go out to the murderer, Charlie Kirk, in his confusion, in his anger, in his angst, in his confusion on who he is, his confusion on what it means to be male and female, his just general confusion? And he thought the answer was to silence the voice that is opposition, and he gave up his life and freedom for that? Does your heart go out to how can somebody get into that much of a mess? It's my desire to cry for a generation of children who were raised with no basis for hope. I want us to cry that they were born into a culture that held them in such low esteem that they could have decided to be terminated, all of them or any of them, based on the whims of their parents. No security in even being born. By the whims of somebody else, I could either be, or we could either be, not even existing. Let's mourn for those who were handed gender confusion and all the attached insecurities that go along with that. You see, if you remember, one of the most at-risk groups are LGBTQ+. Culture would say because they are rejected, and what I want you to understand, what God wrote through Paul was, it's because they've turned from who they are. But I want you to understand this. God has a plan for you, no matter where you are. God offers salvation to you, no matter where you are, no matter your confusion. Because, guys, we all struggle with mental illness, and we all struggle with spiritual illness, and we all need to be saved. And none of us is better than anybody else. And none of our diagnoses are better than anyone else's. They're just different. There, but for the grace of God, go I. Let's grieve for a culture of pet parents who don't know the difference between their offspring and a soulless animal. Pet parents. No, it's not cute. It's perverse. It's just more of this mindset. Let's agonize for those who were born into a dark milieu of unnatural, depraved, feudalistic, foolish, and wicked, those are Paul's words, mess of self-destruction. And then let's vow to make a change. Let's vow to be salt and light. For God so loved the world, no matter our situation. For God so loved the world, no matter who we are. For God so loved the world, no matter what we're battling with. For God so loved the world, no matter how much we hate ourselves. He so loved the world that he gave his own and only Son, so that we would not perish in our spiritual illness, our mental illness, our physical illness, our illness. We could be saved. We can be healed. For the anxious longing of creation waits eagerly for the revealing of the sons of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not of its own will, but because of him who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from the slavery to corruption into the freedom of the glory of the children of God. Not self-image, created in him as in his image, and then reformed to that image. Romans 8:29. For whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brethren. And whom he predestined, these he also called. Those he called, he also justified. And those whom he justified, he also glorified. Made in the image of God, separated by sin, separated by spiritual illness and mental illness and physical illness. All of the things that happened as a result of sin in the garden, separated but reformed into the image of Jesus. No matter what we have to start with, no matter what our insecurities or our inabilities, God takes us there, just as I am. And he forms us in the image of Jesus. Cry for this culture. When you read about someone taking their life, it's not a statistic. It's a precious person, precious soul, created in the image of God, who didn't receive or maybe reject the message of God's love for them. No matter how hopeless it looks, cry for it. And then create resolve. No more. No more. The enemy wins no more. From this point on, Jesus wins. Whatever illness you're struggling with, physical, emotional, mental, psychological, spiritual, there is a great physician that will heal you. Can heal you. Can we help you access that physician? There'll be men in the back, men in the front. Let's talk. Come as we stand and sing.